Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nadine Hoffman. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at the International Women's Media Foundation, and I see people are coming in. We're really excited to have all of you with us on a special day to celebrate the life of Elizabeth Neuffer with her friends and family and with some of the fellows who have been a part of our Elizabeth Neuffer Fellowship. And so just to go ahead and get started today, we want to remember this is a special day. It is Elizabeth's birthday. And we are celebrating her life and her legacy and this special fellowship that her friends and family have done so much to create and sustain over the last 18 years. We remember Elizabeth's career as a foreign correspondent for the Boston Globe, where she worked for more than 13 years and was at the center of global events, covering everything from the Balkans to Moscow to Rwanda and Iraq. And for her courageous reporting, as we know, she was named an IWMF Courage in Journalism awardee in 1998. And just to share a quote from Peter Canellos, who's one of the driving forces behind this fellowship, Elizabeth believed that foreign reporting was a way to express her deepest values. It was her mission in the world. And we are so honored to have been able to be a part of that legacy in life and also to continue it forward with the Elizabeth Neuffer Fellowship. I want to really celebrate too the dedicated friends and family members who have really kept this alive. The fellowship launched in 2005. It's our longest running initiative at the IWMF, and it has served 18 amazing women from around the world who've been selected from thousands of applicants over the years to participate in a special opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity to hone their craft and to advance their skills as human rights and social justice reporters. The fellowship includes a semester at MIT, and it includes internships at the New York Times and the Boston Globe. I've had the pleasure of getting to know many of the Neuffer Fellows over the 13 years that I've worked at the IWMF, and some of the friends and family who are on this call have known all 18 of our fellows, and we're also honored to bring a few of them back today to share their reflections with you. Our fellows have had really transformational experiences in this fellowship, and they've accomplished great things, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. But just to give a few examples, Maham Javad was hired by the Washington Post shortly after she completed her fellowship. A fellow named Pradita Sabarini launched a media startup in Indonesia after she completed her fellowship, and Rabia Mahmood co-founded a digital news publication that has investigated human rights abuses in Pakistan. Those are just a few examples, and we're going to hear more today. I want to really thank our longtime partners who have continued this really excellent tradition of the fellowship at MIT, at the Boston Globe, and at the New York Times. Really, I don't think there's any other experience that exists like this for journalists in the world today, to have this amount of time and space to focus on issues that really are critical to our understanding of the world. Most of all, I want to thank the Friends and the Family Committee, those who are with us today and those who are not able to join as well, for their dedication and their love of Elizabeth that have really carried this program forward over the last 18 years and will continue to do so for many years to come. I want to specifically thank all of those of you who helped to organize this event today, and especially to Peter Canellos, to Mark Neuffer, to Carolyn Lee, Ellen Clegg, to Jim Smith and Holly Hexter, who are all with us today. And I also want to just take a moment to recognize every member of the Friends and Family Committee that participate in the annual selection process, which is really a labor of love and a really difficult process to pick from so many amazing women who apply each year for this opportunity. And just to read out their names, and I'm sorry, I think I missed Jim Smith as well on today's call, but our committee includes Peter Canellos, Ellen Clegg, Carolyn Lee, Michelle English, Katie Kingsbury, Rosie Whitelaw, Christine Moore, Jim Smith, Allison Small, and Sam Verde. And of course, Mark Neuffer has long been a part of that committee as well. I also want to thank the IWMF staff that have helped to make sure that this is an excellent and high quality fellowship opportunity and have spent so much time making sure that our fellows have great experiences every year. And currently the person who's managing this fellowship is Taylor Moore, our associate program manager. So thank you, Taylor, for carrying this tradition forward at the IWMF. This is just a special fellowship that has such a deep-rooted place in the mission of the IWMF, and we look forward to hearing more today from those of you who have been able to be a part of this experience over the years. So now I'm going to pass it to Mark Neuffer, who is going to lead us in sharing some reflections about the fellowship. Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Many thanks to you and to the IWMF, to Peter, and to all who made this event possible. Special thanks also to the Elizabeth Neuffer Fellowship committee members and all the wonderful Elizabeth Neuffer Fellows. I guess I knew Elizabeth the longest of anybody here and the earliest. So since most of you knew her in her adult years, I thought I'd share a few brief glimpses of my younger sister's childhood. She might have regretted these, but there you have it. Thanks to my cousin, Eric Bowman, and my aunt, Lee Bowman, for finding these photographs. So let me put those, let me get those up on the screen here, just a moment. There we go. And like magic, she appears. And this is Christmas in about 1960. And going from left to right, there I am, my brother Dan, there's Elizabeth, and then cousin Eric, Bruce, and Leslie. Here I have to break my sister's anonymity on a particular point. At this time of her life, and until the time she had a byline, she was known to herself, to us, to her family and friends as Buffy Neuffer, the name that shall not be named. Anyway, moving right along here, here is Buffy a few years later at Thanksgiving time, looking, well, very pink and very girly. Here are the two of us a few years after that. Mom insisted that we sit for the studio portrait. Both of us had to be sort of dragooned into it, but it's actually become one of my favorite pictures and a real keeper. And then finally, many years later in the mid-90s here, Elizabeth and I are standing on the stairs of the Lincoln Memorial. So having said all that, let's continue. And my sister was a delightful girl in her early years who loved playing games, preparing meals on her toy stove for an invisible family named the Ginios. We never did find out where they came from. And watching The Avengers and Get Smart on television. Well, okay, to break her anonymity again, Romper Room and Sandy Becker were favorites as well. Elizabeth delighted in my stories featuring her as a worldwide traveler crossing the globe with her faithful quadruped, a camel. I loved to make her toys for her troll dolls. One of her favorites was a heavily armed ship ready for battle, made from a shoebox. We spent many hours playing together with great delight. A few years later, Elizabeth suffered from debilitating episodes of asthmatic bronchitis. When bedridden, she read voraciously from the mounds of library books surrounding her bedside. Perhaps this appetite for discovering the world through books foreshadowed her interest in witnessing it firsthand as a journalist. The years passed, and Elizabeth determined to become a journalist. She showed a boatload of gumption, starting out as a stringer for the New York Times, writing about her travels through the English countryside. And although the much desired job failed to materialize in New York, it turned out that the Boston Globe was the on-ramp for her journalism career. Elizabeth and I partnered well during times of family crisis, notably when our parents approached the ends of their lives. She and I supported each other during some of our dark periods and enjoyed each other's company during the brighter times. Today would have been Elizabeth's 67th birthday. So let me say, happy birthday, Buffy. Let's enjoy all these friends who have joined your party. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark. This event is dedicated to Elizabeth's legacy And what I want to say is that a large part of Elizabeth's legacy is probably right here on the webinar. I can't see everybody's name. I've seen a lot of them coming through. It's the people, most of whom didn't know each other 20 years ago, whose lives Elizabeth touched in varying ways and who've come together almost as a network, steadfast and devoted to keep her memory alive. In many ways, that's been her gift to me and to all of us. Not a month goes by without someone from some corner in the world reaching out to talk about some meaningful experience with Elizabeth. Often those reminiscences are personal from people I didn't even know, and sometimes they're professional. A few months after Elizabeth died, I got a typewritten letter from the dean at an Oxford college dedicated specifically to women. She said Elizabeth had written a lively account of their then new college when she was a stringer for the Times in the early 1980s. Unbeknownst to her, a famous Hollywood costume designer named Irene Sharaff and her partner had read the article and were so impressed that they left their entire multi-million-dollar fortune to the tiny college. And that dean wanted me to know that Elizabeth's work had been transformative and had really been the key to the success of that entire institution. There's also the story that I think some of you know about Marko Bostic, the Bosnian Serb commander who was a major figure in Elizabeth's book and who she used as an example of how so many of the terrible genocidal offenders in the Bosnian War were sort of free and out and about in the world. Shortly after Elizabeth's death, maybe a year or two after Elizabeth's death, he was discovered in Massachusetts, of all places, and brought to justice. There was also the time in 2011 when I went with a group of senior editors on a sort of study tour to Rwanda. And all of us were together in the middle of a meeting with the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame, when the Rwandan Secretary of State who was attending, Louise Mushikiwabo, recognized my name and started speaking excitedly about her own memories of Elizabeth and all that Elizabeth had done to bring dignity to the lives of Rwandan women. I can recount dozens more such encounters over every one of the last 20 years and many, many personal testaments beside that. I think Elizabeth's most heartfelt goal in life was to be true to her own personal experience, to make sure that struggles in her own life were redeemed through empathy and understanding for others. She often talked about something her mother said during tough times, which was to take a negative and make it a positive. That was kind of her creed. That was her own definition of honesty, of what it meant to her to live a life of integrity. There was no sense of withholding in Elizabeth. There was no enigma, no mystery, no layers to pick through. She was always right there in front of you, intensely herself all the time. I think that's one of the reasons that she's remained such a vivid presence to so many people, so really alive right up to this very moment. And it's why so many of her friends were eager to come together to remember her and pay tribute and to celebrate all she meant to them and still means to them and to the wider world, and to share their memories 2 decades hence. So it's my pleasure now to introduce one of those many friends, Holly Hexter, who can offer some of her own thoughts.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Holly Hexter. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to say just a few words on behalf of all of those who knew Elizabeth, not as an exemplary journalist, but as a friend. I'm part of an international coterie, a diaspora of sorts, because as you can tell just from the chat, her friends are scattered throughout the world. Few of us know each other, but in this moment of memory, we're all in the same time zone. We're united in missing her. Elizabeth, or Buffy as I knew her, was funny, intrepid, whip smart, loyal, and competitive. When jokes or stories were being shared, she told the most outrageous ones, and she had the loudest laugh in the room. We traded political gossip and swapped our favorite novels. She was, as Mark said, a voracious reader. And I appreciated that as a fellow English major. But what stays with me the most is Elizabeth's kindness. In the midst of reporting human atrocities, she was compassionate and generous. While staring down daily deadlines, she unfailingly made time for friends, whether they were her downstairs neighbors or visitors who landed on her doorstep in DC, New York, Weston, Connecticut, or across the pond. When we visited her on assignment in Berlin, she took off a full day to take us to Wannsee and Potsdam and snagged for us much coveted concert tickets for the Berlin Philharmonic. Elizabeth had a deep, abiding connection with her friends' children as well. My daughter knew her first as that very cool adult who took her seriously, and later as a model for adulthood, showing her with her fearlessness how she could set her own path as a young woman. And I know that she played that mentoring role for many other young women as well. So happy birthday, Buffy. Through the IWMF Fellowship and the efforts of Mark, Peter, and friends and colleagues, and through our memories, your legacy continues. Here's a short video with some of those memories.
I have the honor of talking about my colleague Elizabeth Neuffer, who unfortunately is no longer with us. She was a journalist in just the best tradition.
17 years ago this month, I stood before her friends at the Boston Globe to report that she had died covering the war in Iraq. Elizabeth was 46, an experienced foreign correspondent, a mentor to others, vivacious and brave. Her Iraqi driver was traveling at high speed because of the risk of abductions. He lost control. Elizabeth died instantly. Her translator, too. Elizabeth had a record of fearlessness in investigating war crimes and human rights abuses. Her goal? Reveal the world as it is, because someone might then make things better.
My guest, Elizabeth Neuffer, recently returned from 6 weeks in the Gulf region, reporting on Iraq, Kuwait, and Jordan. Neuffer covers foreign affairs and the United Nations for the Boston Globe. She also covered the war against terrorism in Afghanistan, the war in Bosnia, and the 1991 Gulf War. She wrote about the aftermath of war and the war crimes tribunals in her book, The Key to My Neighbor's House, Seeking Justice in Bosnia and Rwanda.
Back in 1990, you have to understand, being a woman and covering the Middle East was something that just really hadn't happened up until then. In the streets, it was Elizabeth who managed to latch on to a translator and a driver for us. She immediately arranged our programs. She took us out to meet Kuwaitis who had stories of what had happened during the Iraqi occupation, and she was just relentless in documenting everything that had happened during the Iraqi occupation. She wrote meticulous, thoroughly researched stories.
Is there a story that you've told that has had the biggest impact, that you feel really good about?
Well, I'd have to, again, refer back to The Key to My Neighbor's House. I was really haunted by some of the people I covered in Bosnia and Rwanda, and that's why I chose to take time off and to write the book. So the two stories I feel most strongly about are Hassan Nuhanovic, and I told his story at various points throughout the Bosnian War. Hassan is a survivor of Srebrenica, the UN-safe area that was overrun by Bosnian Serb troops. 8,000 Bosnian men and boys were slaughtered. Hassan survived, but he lost his family. And a series of stories I know answered a lot of questions for him about sort of who had pulled the trigger and why. And that was kind of a pretty neat thing to be able to do. The second story is, again, Witness JJ, this remarkable woman I met in Rwanda after the genocide. I told her story, along with that of other women, of how they were willing to come forward and talk about their rape. Just an extraordinary set of accounts, particularly in conservative Rwanda, where women rarely talk about issues of sex. And wrote that story, and when I returned, I guess 3 or 4 years later, I found that, in fact, Witness JJ, and you notice I'm calling her Witness JJ and not by her name, had gone on to be a lead witness at the UN War Crimes Tribunal. And in fact, it's due to her testimony that rape is now considered to be an act of genocide. That is a historical first for women.
To whomever finds this, this is being written at the end of 1999 and at the beginning of a new millennium. It is also the end of a century, what has been one of the bloodiest centuries ever seen. Despite the incredible advancements mankind has made in science, the arts, and medicine, as a foreign correspondent for the Boston Globe, which hopefully still is a newspaper that publishes in New England, that worked out pretty well so far. I had some part in seeing some of this bloodshed while reporting on wars in the Gulf, Bosnia, and Rwanda. I would hope by the time you find this note, wars are extinct. But if they are not, please think again and stop them. I'd like to think the next millennium will be one in which people are not killed or prejudiced against because of their race, ethnicity, or religion. In fact, all of us in 1999 are counting on you to ensure the future is one of peace. Please make it so. Elizabeth Neuffer. Let's remember that tonight and for a long time, shall we?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Leith, a former New York Times editor, and 20 years ago, I was a board member of the IWMF. When the time came, the IWMF was honored to be asked to join in planning an appropriate tribute to Elizabeth's memory. The first suggestion was simple: name a Courage in Journalism Award for her. But ideas kept coming, and the group's discussions with Mark, Peter, and the Boston Globe continued and became more expansive. Let's not just honor Elizabeth's legacy, we thought, let's perpetuate it. So the Elizabeth Neuffer Fund was established to provide an annual fellowship to an international journalist with the same passion for social justice and human rights. As we discussed eligibility, we thought of the various points in Elizabeth's career when she had or could have used a helping hand. There was the young woman of limited experience who was on her own and seeking out mentors and opportunities to write. There was the more experienced reporter who was developing skills and expertise that formal study and new mentors could nurture. And there was the seasoned journalist who had seen the havoc that mankind can wreak, who needed a respite and a chance to give the world the important insights of her book, The Key to My Neighbor's House. The Neuffer Fund should provide help, we thought, to female journalists who have reached those points in their own careers. What if we gave them time in the Boston Globe and New York Times newsrooms, working alongside veteran writers and editors, sharing insights and methods? Both newspapers came aboard. The Globe wholeheartedly for their star reporter, and the Times recognizing Elizabeth's contributions to the Times Company, which was then owner of both newspapers. It is an absolute truth that the Globe's initial enthusiasm and its ongoing stalwart support have been essential to the success of this program. Elizabeth's professional home continues to be the foundation for the Neuffer Fellowship, thanks to Linda Henry and a collection of writers and editors among the world's best. But there's more. Dick Samuels, a friend of Elizabeth's at the MIT Center for International Studies, encouraged and facilitated access to classes and seminars at MIT and other Boston area universities. The Neuffer Fellow can choose among professors and subjects that speak to her professional interests and needs and participate in the rich intellectual stimulus they offer during the fellowship period. I'm proud to report too, as a former Times person, that newspaper has remained a staunch participant and fan of the program and of the fellows who have come through their newsroom. As you watch the next presentations, we hope you'll be as pleased and inspired as we have been in seeing Elizabeth's legacy carried forward by a dauntless group of journalists, the Elizabeth Neuffer Fellows.
Prodita Kusuma Sabarini, and I am an Elizabeth Neuffer Fellow.
I'm Audrey Lee. I'm a Chinese journalist and an Elizabeth Neuffer Fellow from 2017 to 2018.
My name is Priyanka Borpujari, and I was the 2012 IWMF Elizabeth Neuffer Fellow.
My name is Baham Javed, and I am an Elizabeth Neuffer Fellow.
Hi everyone, I am Gabriela Sapessoa. I am the current Neuffer Fellow. This is my first day at the New York Times. I am arriving at the office right now.
During my fellowship, I met the most incredible journalists, many of whom knew and remembered Elizabeth very fondly. These editors mentored me very generously. They helped me learn new reporting skills and improved my writing.
My fellowship journey was a pivotal moment in my life. The classes and seminars that I took at MIT, Harvard, and Tufts University really broadened my horizon of knowledge. And the mentorship from editors at the Boston Globe and the New York Times prepared me for the next journey of my career.
The Elizabeth Neuffer Fellowship was actually one of the best times of my life. I think it provided me a chance to sharpen my professional skills, deepen domain knowledge, strengthen my commitment to my public mission, and form lifelong friendships.
I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm so grateful for IWMF and for Neuffer's legacy. She was a brave journalist.
Elizabeth Neuffer was deeply inspiring in learning about her commitment to human rights and justice and how she always looked at the nuanced stories.
She has always been and will be a role model to me.
Throughout these years, I've kept Elizabeth Neuffer's memory and her legacy to inspire me when I encounter moments of doubt or hardship. I remember her courage and integrity and her commitment to tell stories that reminds us of our shared humanity. And also, I remember the support I got during my fellowship, and it has always kept me going.
I'm really happy, and I hope that after this fellowship ends, I can apply everything I learned and make better journalism after that.
And I hope someday I'm able to mentor young journalists in a similar fashion. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Smith. I had the great fortune to be Elizabeth's foreign editor at the Boston Globe. Every editor should be so lucky. And it's no surprise that so many colleagues from our team in those days have joined this celebration today. So greetings to all of you as well. But we've heard a lot about Elizabeth's legacy. Let's jump forward to hear from the women who represent that living legacy. And remember that Peter and Mark and the IWMF have forged this great opportunity in creating the Elizabeth Neuffer Fellowship back in 2005. These are just 3 of the 18 fellows so far. Their reporting is now shedding light on the same issues of human rights and social justice that Elizabeth cared so deeply about. What a great multiplier effect to have all of these Neuffer Fellows out in the world doing this great work. We don't have much time. Let's jump in. We are here with these 3 fellows today. Ada Patrichko from Poland. Among many career highlights, she was an editor at News Mavens, the first European newsroom run entirely by women. She has reported on gender and rights issues from South Asia to Europe, not least Ukraine, that she's now writing for the New York Times. Maham Javed from Pakistan has written on rights issues, including honor killings, the HIV crisis in Pakistan, and much more. She's now a reporter for the Washington Post, writing about Ukraine and a host of other issues. Louisa Reynolds is a Latin America specialist based in Guatemala. Just one detail on Louisa: she was part of a team that created Troll Busters, a digital tool to combat online harassment of women. So let's hear from the 3 of you. I first just throw out the open question. What's one core skill that you took away from the Neuffer Fellowship that you are using in your work today? Who wants to start? Ada?
Sure. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation. I am thrilled and stoked, and yes, even a year after, it still feels surreal to me that I was able to have this amazing opportunity. And I think while I had it, I used the word surreal at least a few times a day because it really felt like a dream. But if I were to select one core skill, it would probably be networking, because I feel that it's just, it's an amazing opportunity on so many different levels. But where I come from in Central Eastern Europe, we're not really used to that style of networking, which I came across, in the States, and which just felt so natural and so easy. I've just encountered so many people that had an amazing curiosity about who I am and what I can bring to the table as a journalist, as a person. And I think I've learned, and I took away that openness and that humility and that sense of curiosity, towards anybody that I can meet that can potentially enrich my work. And I feel really grateful for that. Thank you.
That's terrific. And because time is so short, I throw it to Mohammed and Louisa, maybe to take that question slightly in a different direction. And let me hear, how have you put to work that skill in your reporting? Is there an example in the field, since you were a fellow, that you can cite on a story that really worked, Mohammed or Louisa?
I can go. Hi, everyone. Firstly, thank you, everyone, for being here. My entire Neuffer journey is just like from the very first time that I met everyone for the interview. Like, it's just been such a joyful experience. I'm sorry, everything's so dark. I'm in a cabin in Virginia, and yeah. Anyway, I think my big skill and the way I used it, was collaborating and talking to editors while reporting, which is a kind of honestly luxury and privilege that I hadn't had before this. Before you leave for reporting, there were editors at the Globe who'd be like, okay, how do you want to do this? What do you think you're going to be talking to people about? And then as you're reporting and the story is developing, you're still in collaboration and in communication with editors. And this communication is something that I developed the skill during the fellowship, and I've kept it up afterwards. And it's really it's really benefited my reporting, this open collaboration. I didn't even know that this was something that we could do before the fellowship. I just thought editors were people you went to once you were done with your reporting to be like, how do I write this? But this has really improved my entire experience.
That's really helpful. Louisa.
Yes, hi, and it's an honor to be here today, and it's a pleasure to see so many people here, such as Peter, such as Caroline, that I had the great pleasure of meeting during the fellowship. And yes, what the other fellows have said totally resonates with me. It is definitely an opportunity to acquire better networking skills, and as a result of that, I remained very strongly connected with the IWMF network, and those networking skills that I acquired during the fellowship, in terms of being able to contact editors and building a network of people that I could turn to for advice, etc., was really, really valuable. And I actually stayed connected with the IWMF beyond the fellowship. And in 2017, I was an Adelante Fellow as well. I traveled to Colombia, and I wrote an article about African Colombian midwives in some of the areas most affected by the Colombian Civil War. So that was a great opportunity, and to this day, I very much remain connected to the IWMF network. And after the fellowship, I returned to Guatemala. I covered some pretty interesting developments that were happening in Guatemalan politics. Former President Otto Pérez Molina was sent to prison on corruption charges. So it was a very tumultuous time in Guatemala and very challenging as well. Then after that, I relocated to Mexico. I'm actually based in Mexico City at the moment. And during the pandemic, I started focusing on covering LGBT rights and issues linked with the whole topic of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I produced a series of work related to LGBT health workers. And one of those pieces actually won me the GLAD Award, the GLAD Media Award last year, which was amazing. And I feel that taking part in the fellowship made me a far more confident reporter. And I think that all the things that I've done in recent years have been, to a great extent, thanks to the skills that I acquired during the fellowship.
You know, we're living in the middle of another terrible war. I wonder, one of the great strengths of Elizabeth was remembering how she often shared her own experience with younger reporters. On the eve of the Iraq war, she talked about herself as a mother hen and offering really practical advice that was really helpful to the whole Globe team then. What advice now would you be able to offer to younger reporters who may be going to cover Ukraine, as you as I think a couple of you have done? What specific warnings, guidance would be helpful for young reporters? Who wants to take that? Ada.
Let me think. I would say always never settle for easy explanations. Something that, you know, really stayed with me from Elizabeth's legacy, from the book that I wrote, I read before the fellowship started, her book in Bosnia, The Key to My Neighbor's House, was how she, you know, she described mass murder Boskic, and while doing that, I could see that she was really trying to, you know, go one step further than the usual, try to see a person in each murderer, but she would actually try to find herself in each murderer. She wrote, "The evil that I glimpsed in him was the potential for evil we all share. For being human is no guarantee of our humanity. What's most chilling when you meet a murderer is that you meet yourself." And that was just such a strong quote. And I remember I kept thinking about it a lot, you know, during many stories that I've been doing, and that sense of, you know, always trying to find yourself in the person that you're talking to, and vice versa is very strong for me. So I would say yes, never settle for easy explanations, and have incredible attention to detail, because that's where the real story lies. You know, no generalizations, no universality. Actually, universality comes from details. So stay close to that.
Those are terrific points. Mohammed or Louisa, would you want to add to that? Any advice for young reporters?
Yeah, I don't know if my volume, if my sound is any better. Is it? Okay, great.
It's good. It's good.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think just speaking from the experiences that I've had, and also thinking about Elizabeth, I think trusting yourself, right? Like when you're going into situations which are new or difficult or unique, I think that's something that's so important to remember, trusting your instincts, because if you've made it so far and you've been sent, you know, to a war zone, to a conflict zone, there is something about you that deserves to be there. And I think just remembering to trust your instincts, to trust yourself, and remember your own experiences has always been my way to deal with new or unique situations.
Good counsel. Good counsel. Louisa?
Yes, I think as Mahan said, trust your instincts and believe in yourself. I think that's very important when you're starting out. I mean, I think it's normal. Everyone, you know, earlier on in their career, it's normal to have doubts. Am I doing things right? Am I going down the right path? And yes, definitely listen to your mentors and seek out that help, but also believe in yourself and keep going no matter what. And I think that's one of the great things about this fellowship, that just the fact of being a fellow in itself makes you a much more confident person. I mean, I remember when I applied for the fellowship, never in my wildest dreams did I expect to be a finalist, and let alone to actually get the fellowship. And I remember that I applied thinking, well, this is going to be like a practice run, and if I keep at it, maybe in 5 or 6 years, I might be able to get a fellowship. So I gave it my best shot. I tried my best, and then I was ever so surprised when I made it to the final round, and then even more surprised when I was chosen as a fellow. And I remember it took like a while, a couple of days, for the fact that I was a fellow to sink in. And it was the first time that I'd ever applied for anything. And after that, it made me a lot more confident in terms of applying for opportunities. And since then, I've gone on to apply for other fellowships, to apply for grants, to do many other things, because it made me a lot more confident as a journalist and as a person.
These observations are so important and powerful. And I think I can say that they are shared by so many of the fellows. I've, having been part of the selection committee, have just heard so much strength and wisdom from all of you supporting each other. It's just been extraordinary to see. I think we have to, I'm afraid, wrap up now, but I'm going to take the sneak in just a separate thought from Marty Barron, who spoke at the Kennedy Library ceremony for Elizabeth soon after she died, because it reflects not only on Elizabeth, but I think on all of you who have been Neuffer Fellows over the years. We owe it to ourselves as journalists, and we owe it to Elizabeth to state clearly and without fear of boasting that such work, her work, the reporter gathering information with determination and honesty and empathy, the hard and often unpopular business of truth-telling, is not just a job, but a vital and virtuous enterprise. So thanks to all of you who are carrying out that enterprise.
Hi, I'm Ellen Clegg. I had the pleasure of working with Elizabeth in the newsroom of the Boston Globe before she went overseas. I was her editor for a while. And then I had the privilege of working with many talented Neuffer Fellows on the editorial page at the Globe. We would like to open the forum to people to share remembrances of Elizabeth. There are a lot of people here. If you could keep it to 1 or 2 minutes, that'd be great. The more we hear from, the better. And if you could use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, I'll know to call on you. Also, you can post something in the chat. There's wonderful comments already. So with that said, I'd love to open it up. Ann Barnard, are you here? Can I embarrass you and ask you to share some of what you put in the chat?
Hi, how is everybody? Oh my gosh, so many people that I love are on this call. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say without starting to cry, but I did say in the chat that you know, even before I met Elizabeth, she was like out there as a role model, like not only as a woman, but as the kind of person who was doing the type of journalism that I would would have wanted to do and hope I did do, which is to be on the ground reporting things as they are, as Marty so wonderfully said, and sort of calling it like you see it. And I really hope that she's remembered for writing that piece that ran in Globe Ideas that was reported in southern Iraq before the invasion, saying, yeah, these people don't want to welcome us as, you know, it's not going to be simple. You know, it was one of the few reported pieces that really made that clear. But I was one of the chicks of the mother hen, and yeah, there are things that I mean, talk about the multiplier effect. I have said this to so many other young reporters, or not young reporters, but people that are going into a war zone for the first time, or doing something frightening. You know, I will never forget. I think about it so often. Neuffer saying, just because you're scared, it doesn't mean that you're the wrong person for this job. You know, a lot of dudes will try to make you think that's the case, or not, you know, not 100% a gendered thing, but that is so, if you're aware enough and clued in enough that you have the sense to be afraid, like that just means you're a good reporter, because you're observing what you're going on around you and you're not denying or closing out any feelings. You guys can read more about what I put in the chat. I mean, it's all there, and I think I will post it later on. But you know, the three people in the Globe were me in Baghdad for the Globe right before Elizabeth died, were me, Thanasi, and Elizabeth. Thanasi is my husband. And we were a new couple, like we literally got together then. And when she died, she had been telling me about how proud she was of her career, and how also she wanted to live her life differently. And I hope I'm not overstepping a bound. She was talking about, you know, being more with Peter and things like this, and, you know, other things that they were going to maybe do. And I honestly have to say that I've thought about it ever since. And I don't know that we've succeeded. There have been a lot of sacrifices and scars and maybe harms to our family, but we are still a family. We're celebrating our 18th wedding anniversary on Saturday. And even as I continue to do this kind of work, and Elizabeth wasn't the first or the last beloved colleague that we've lost, but I think that she influenced us, and Peter and Marty and Jim and people took active steps to help us make it true that we could live as human beings while doing this kind of work. And I will never forget that, and I will never forget the Globe for that. And I'll never forget Elizabeth for that. Love you.
Thank you, Anne. Does somebody else want to weigh in? Barbara. Maham.
I can go, or Barbara can go first. I mean, and I'll be quick, and then Barbara can go. I just wanted to share that one of the other beautiful, like, the fellowship is such a beautiful way to remember Elizabeth, and I wanted to share and tell everyone that it's working. You know, apart from, you know, making our careers, helping us. So when I was at the Globe, that's when the war on Ukraine started, and one of the stories, I had a story idea. It was interesting. It was about how, you know, right at the start of the war, there was a lot of talk about how the fear of nuclear war was kind of being reignited. And I had this idea where I was like, I want to talk to people who were present, you know, during the Cold War era, to see if for them some of the trauma is like similar to what it was before. And because this was not an opinion piece, it was a story, a reported story, I got assigned an editor in the paper, and it turned out that the editor that I was working with, Roy, had worked with Elizabeth. And just the fact that, you know, I was getting to work with someone who knew her, who remembered her, and spoke about her like every time Roy and I would talk, he would speak about Elizabeth and how, maybe she would approach this story, and how, like, it was just so real to me. I was like, this is like, it's such a beautiful way to remember her, like, not just through her work, but literally doing work with someone who she had worked with. It was a really, and I think, I mean, for whatever it's worth, I think it also like helped Roy, like he was also able to be like, oh, I'm able to remember my friend in this way by like working on, a story like that. So yeah, I just wanted to share that this fellowship does a lot for us, but in like secret, indirect ways, it does things for other people as well.
Barbara.
Yes, thank you. Am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm invisible, but that's okay. I reported quite a bit with Elizabeth, mostly in Bosnia. We moved to Berlin about the same time and headed to Sarajevo around the same time. And listening to the people who were awarded the Elizabeth Neuffer Courage Award, I would just add something about her reporting is the quality would be persistence. Elizabeth was persistent. She just wouldn't stop on a story when she had enough. And I think that's what made her reporting over the top. And I mean, Elizabeth was ambitious professionally, but she actually cared more about the people she was interviewing and writing about than she did about her own career. There was this passion and just persistence. She wouldn't let it go. And, that was certainly the case in her reporting of The Key to My Neighbor's House. I have a copy here. I'm not on video, but if you could see it, you'd see it has like little sticky notes all through the book. Her observations about the nature of evil and about human characters. I mean, it goes so beyond, regular everyday journalism. And I miss her very much. Elizabeth and I have the same birthday, June 15th. And I'm living about 20 blocks from her old apartment. And if she were here, we would be celebrating our birthdays together. So I'm sad and I miss her. That's all I had to say.
Thank you so much for that. We have an anonymous quote. We have an anonymous quote in the Q&A, but I see in the chat Indira Lakshmanan would like to speak. So Indira, please take it away.
Thanks, Ellen. And thank you so much to Peter and IWMF and everyone for organizing this. It is such a wonderful way to remember someone who was so special and touched all of us individually, and to have her legacy living on is just, it's a great birthday present to me too, because my birthday is one day after Elizabeth's, tomorrow. And I always shared that with her. Like Anne Bernard said, I'm also one of her chicks, to whom she was a mother hen. And, I know Farah had to get off already, but she was as well, as are so many women on this call. And Elizabeth was incredible. And it was incredible to have a mentor who I admired so much, but also who I wanted to please so much. She had such incredibly high standards that everybody should be as rigorous and accurate and efficient and true as she was, and also showed us in what she did how to be as empathetic as she was and to care so deeply for the subject. I got to work with Elizabeth. It was an incredible privilege and really shaped my abilities as a war correspondent, a foreign correspondent. I got to fill in for her when she had to go on leave from the Bosnia War. And she was stressed because she had to get back because of family concerns. And yet she did so much to train me. I literally did not know how to drive a stick shift. And upon landing in Croatia, that was all there was to rent. So in the parking lot, in the rental place, Elizabeth taught me how to drive a Russian Lada Niva, an ancient old clunker, taught me how to drive a stick shift. We went into Bosnia. It was wartime. It was a blizzard. She taught me how to put chains on the tires. We arrived very efficiently in the apartment that she had rented in Tuzla, and she quickly introduced me to Barbara Demick and Fawn and Tom Hundley and so many other amazing foreign correspondents, and made sure that I was part of their little pocket and that they were watching over me. And just all the way along, she taught me so much about how to do the job, the logistics, but most of all, how to have the heart of putting into it, caring about the people who you're writing about and making sure that you could do your job safely for yourself and for them. She was just incredible, and it was a gift to know her. I see I see Barbara saying that she also Elizabeth also taught Barbara how to drive. Oh, you taught Elizabeth how to drive a stick shift. Well, yes, it was terrifying all the way along, but I just learned so much from her, and just feel blessed to have been part of her circle. And I thank everyone on this call for keeping her memory and her values alive and passing them on to so many others. Thanks.
Thank you, Indira. Lisa Kissel.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kissel. I'm a friend of Elizabeth's and Peter's, and many, many memories. But there's been so much talk about fear, being afraid on the job. And so I'm remembering when Elizabeth spoke at a women and leadership conference in Boston, and told all these harrowing stories from Bosnia. Someone in the audience then made the comment that she is truly fearless. And Elizabeth kind of shot back and said, I am not fearless. I have a lot of fear, but I have to overcome it. I have to go in and do my job. And that really seems to be the true definition of courage.
Thank you so much. David Shribman. David, I thought I saw a hand raised, but Richard, are you there? Hey, there you are.
Yep, here I am. Okay. I'm David Shribman, and I'm one of a series of supervisors or editors who work for Elizabeth. And it was a great pleasure and a great privilege to be so. But I want to talk just for a second about the impact she had on our family. My older daughter is named Elizabeth as well, and they took to each other. And Elizabeth Neuffer became a great leader and a great friend and a great mentor and teacher to Elizabeth Shribman. And she would have been very proud of her protege, Elizabeth Shribman. And Elizabeth Shribman always talks about the person she called twin, because they both were called Elizabeth. My Elizabeth was about 4 or 5 years old at the time. And she spent a lot of time, the older Elizabeth spent a lot of time at our house with the younger Elizabeth. And I'm very grateful for that gift. And I know the other Elizabeth is as well. I want to thank all of you. And it was wonderful to see all of you and to be all together. Once again, Elizabeth's greatest gift was to bring people together.
Thank you, David. That's so lovely. Richard Samuels, I believe your hand was up.
Yes, thanks, Ellen. As reminiscences go, there are a few stronger in my experiences than the last time I saw Elizabeth. Elizabeth and Peter and my wife Deb and I had become very good friends. We had met in Italy and stayed close, and it was the night before she left for Iraq. And one of the comments just prior to mine was this issue of fear. And I asked Elizabeth the same question, and I got the same answer. And there was no visible sense that she had any second thoughts at all about what she was about to embark on in Iraq. But I wanted to say one thing. I direct the Center for International Studies at MIT, and each of, as you've heard, each of our wonderful Neuffer Fellows have cycled through the center, spent a semester with us, and there's a connection that they bring to the center that shouldn't go unstated, which is that they bring us the real world that we theorize about, and we're a bunch of academics, but they're writing history in real time. At least that, as the old statement goes, the first draft of history is theirs, and having them with us to check on our ideas, liven our own conversations, and to incorporate a sharing about Elizabeth's ideas was something that was consistent across all their experiences, certainly with me, and I'm sure with others at MIT. So it was just a great honor to be involved with this program, and to continue to be involved with this program, and to use it as a way, to use Elizabeth's memory as a way to accelerate better journalism and clearer thinking in world affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Is there anybody else who would like to speak before I go to the Q&A?
I had put my hand up. This is
Allison.
Hi. Greetings to everybody. It is so incredibly great to think of Elizabeth being surrounded by so many wonderful people, as she was in her life, and she now is still in her death. I always thought I would grow old with Elizabeth, as I wrote immediately after her death. Now it is many years on, and the girl who she loved so much, our daughter Lucy, has become a journalist of kind, as she also propagates the German language in the UK's language-poor schools. I just wanted to chime in with the inevitable, that Elizabeth was brave, she was fearless, she was deeply human. But most of all, I wanted to just emphasize, for she and me, I thought it was really a deep friendship. And it just shows what you can achieve with deep friendship.
I'm terribly sorry. It's the husband of Elson's mail, Sergei Dreznin, a pianist, and I assume at the end of the tribute, you will hear my tribute to Elizabeth. May I add one phrase to what Elson said?
Quickly.
May I? I don't hear them talk. No, it doesn't matter. I mean, for me, Elizabeth.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, since I love Wagner as a musician, and Elizabeth had this Germanic roots, and it showed. For me, she was like one of these warrior women, Valkyria. She always reminded me, and she was, always in some kind of vehicle, going to the war zone, fearless, and she was, in the best sense of the word, larger than life, which I also am, and I always adored her quality of just coming to the room. She filled the room. She insisted. She was loud. She was insistent. I assume maybe many men with whom she had to work with, maybe they even felt a little bit uncomfortable with her, because she just never let go until she got what she wanted. And since living in the United States now requires a lot of civil courage, I just wonder what Elizabeth would say about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as Sergei said, we will hear a beautiful Gershwin tribute later to close out this this webinar. Would anyone else like to speak? So I want to read an interesting question. It's anonymous. It's in the Q&A. What do Elizabeth's friends and family think she'd be most interested in covering today? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I can offer that thought. I think she probably would be interested in covering Ukraine. I think she would be drawn to a conflict and looking for ways to end conflict. She really believed that to be her life's mission. It was also part of what she wrote in that piece that was read by Kim Murphy in the video, but it was part of a great idea that Lisa Kissel, who was on this call before, she had a millennium party at her farm in Vermont and asked people to put their thoughts down for a time capsule for 100 years from now. And Elizabeth's concern at that time was very much about war and conflict and creating mechanisms to end war and conflict. I think she would, in a very compassionate way, be identifying with the plight of the people in Ukraine. I think she would be pleased at the extent to which NATO and the United States has kind of rallied to Ukraine's defense, but I think she would be chagrined, as she often was, that the average American isn't aware of the kind of toll that these conflicts exact. And she felt that Americans were so insulated and so sort of unaware of the commonalities between their own lives and the lives of people overseas. I notice we have Nella Hozek on this call too, and she can attest to the fact that Elizabeth felt that the people in Sarajevo were just like the people in the United States. And she kept saying to me, you don't understand, this could happen in our country, this could happen. And I repeatedly would think, oh, come on, really, yeah, our country, no, this is some, foreign ancient hatred that we don't really understand. Elizabeth really rejected those ideas. I mean, she would reject the idea that there was something, inevitable about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, or some higher purpose in mind there. And she would see it as almost like a natural disaster that occurred and want to be with it.
Mark.
Thank you. I agree with Peter, and I think she would be fascinated with the situation in Ukraine. And my sense, I've read a lot of what Timothy Snyder, the Yale historian, has to say about both the history and the conflict in Ukraine. And I can't help but imagine that my sister would have dived deep into the history of the area and would have done a remarkable job of contextualizing the snapshots that we see daily. I think she would have done a superb job, and I think that really could be the basis of another book, because I haven't seen that, a book of that sort published, which carefully untangles the ethnic complexities of that area. I think they're age-old. And of course, if you're seeing swastikas, painted on things in the area, it's clear that a lot of these old conflicts have persisted and could stand some clarification. Just another quick thought. I have a feeling that my sister would also, if she were in Washington, she'd have a heyday with the, well, I'm not sure how she would have characterized it, but with the sort of lunatic behavior that is going on in government and the threat that poses to our society and to democracy generally. So those are a few thoughts, and thank you for the opportunity to share them.
Thank you, Mark. Louisa, your hand is raised.
Hi, yes, I think that one of the issues that Elizabeth might have been very interested today is actually climate change, because we tend to think of conflict reporting as war zones, but we often overlook the structural causes of conflict. And back in 2018, sorry, I covered the first migrant caravan that traveled from Honduras all across Mexico to the northern border with the US. And I did a lot of work on climate change. And I think that's one of those often overlooked issues that Elizabeth might have been very interested in, and how in the future conflict will be very much shaped by issues such as water, climate, all of these things that sometimes get overlooked when we're talking about conflict reporting.
Thank you, Louisa, and thank you, everybody, for sharing these memories and thoughts that really keep Elizabeth's memory alive. I have a few closing remarks, and then we are going to hear a beautiful piano solo from Sergei Drezhnin, friend of Elizabeth. It's Our Love Is Here to Stay. It's the last song that George and Ira Gershwin wrote together. And I'll give my closing remarks, and then we'll pivot to that beautiful song, and people can listen and then file out. So I'm Ellen Clegg. As I said before, I was her editor in the newsroom and longtime friend. Elizabeth remains a vivid and much talked about presence in our home. She actually introduced me to Ellen Zucker, her longtime friend from Wilton, Connecticut, and Elizabeth suggested we might hit it off. So I'm happy to report that Ellen and I have been together for more than 30 years, and we were married by our rabbi in 2016. In fact, Ellen Zucker's last conversation with Elizabeth was from her hospital bed in the OBGYN ward of Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge, right after our son Jake was born in April 2003. Elizabeth told Ellen she was heading off to report from Iraq, but she hoped she could be Jake's fairy godmother, swooping in and out of our lives and spoiling him rotten. We wish that could be so. But we've made certain to talk with Jake, and frankly, anyone who will listen, about what Elizabeth meant in our lives, about why her work matters, especially today. Everyone on this call knows that fact-based journalism is in a precarious state, endangered by a challenging business model and by the rise of irresponsible platforms and voices that traffic in racism, xenophobia, and fascist rhetoric. We've all testified here today to Elizabeth's inspiring legacy. So what does she leave us with? She leaves us with a courageous network of women who have put themselves at risk to report the truth from some of the most difficult parts of the world. She leaves us with a loving network of friends and family members who fervently wish she could be here today, blushing slightly at all this praise, tossing her head back and laughing loud and strong. In many ways, she is here through all of you who have been part of this fellowship and this work. Thank you for carrying on her work and for shining a light into dark corners and giving voice to the voiceless. Thank you, Elizabeth. We hear you, we love you, and we'll make your words our mission.
Technical difficulties. Give us 1 second.